It is a great honor for me and for the AMIB to receive in our 2021 convention to Jenny Johnson, who is the President and CEO of Franklin Resources Incorporated, better known in Mexico as Franklin Templeton Asset Management. As a brief introduction to our participants, I want to stress a few of the most important achievements of Mrs. Johnson. Jenny joined Franklin Templeton back in 1988 and held several leadership roles in all major divisions of the business, including investment management, distribution, customer service, fund administration, technology, and a high net worth business before becoming the CEO in February of 2020. She led the historic acquisition of Black Mason in 2020, with a newly combined organization managing $1.5 trillion in assets globally. Impressive. Mrs. Johnson was named Barron's list of the 100 most influential women in the US finance in 2020 as well as in 2021. She was named 2021 Woman of the Year by Financial Woman of San Francisco. She has been named one of the Money Management Executive's top women in asset management and was chosen by her peers as one of the Ignite's most influential women in fund management. Mrs. Johnson is a recipient of NICSA Robert L. Gout Award, which recognizes outstanding achievements in helping the mutual funds industry better service investors through customer service, through leadership and technology. Mrs. Johnson earned a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of California at Davis. She is a board member of the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, the JMT Wilderness Conservancy, and the Carolines Foundation, and a trustee at Crystal Springs Uplands School. Mrs. Johnson also serves as an advisor of Shatter Fund LLC, a venture capital firm focused on investing in technology companies led and funded by female entrepreneurs. In addition, she is a member of the New York Stock Exchange Board Advisory Council, which identifies and connects diverse board candidates to the New York Stock Exchange listed companies seeking new directors. Today, we are honored to have also Hugo Petricioli, who is president of the board, CEO, and country head of Franklin Templeton Asset Management, Mexico and Central America. And he is also responsible for the offshore business of Franklin Templeton in Texas in the United States. For our benefit, Hugo is the vice chairman of the Asset Management Committee at the AMIB, and he is the spokesman for the association regarding the funds industry. Hugo represents the Independent Asset Management of Mexico and is a found member of the Executive Committee of Funds in our country, whose self-regulatory entities represent the industry with regulators, authorities, and in the industry as a whole. Thank you, Jenny and Hugo, for sharing your views in the trends of the global asset management business. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to host Jenny today, to have I think, a very interesting conversation for the asset management industry in Mexico. Thank you for your time, Jenny. Well, the first question that I'm gonna use is this one. The battle of AUMs frequently pits active managers versus passive providers. Franklin Templeton is a firm that remains committed to active management. What makes you optimistic that this is the right approach?
Well, first of all, Hugo, it's great to be here, and I'm honored to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I'm only sorry that I wasn't better in my Spanish classes so that I could be answering you in Spanish, but you'd never understand a word from me. So I honestly wish I could be better at that. But, you know, in the passive versus active. So first of all, I think this is a hugely underappreciated risk as we talk about these two things. So first of all, fundamentally believe passive has its place in any portfolio. But what I think is at risk is people don't always understand. We just talk about market beta as if market beta's risk never moves. But the day Tesla joined the S&P 500, that index became much riskier. That market beta became much riskier. And so when you're adjusting for a portfolio to build a full portfolio, you have to be able to adjust to beta's risk. And we have actually both passive and active. Our passive ETFs are the cheapest out there in the industry. That's on purpose because we believe that it is very important that people understand when you're buying passive, you're not buying risk-adjusted returns. And I'll give you my example of why that matters. If you told me to get from point A to point B in a car, and it was a straight, well-paved road with no cross sections, I could buy a car that doesn't have a lot of safety features. But if suddenly I had to drive to the mountains and it was going to snow or there's some terrible inclement weather or whatever, I'm going to wish my car had those additional safety features, and I'm going to wish that I had paid up for those safety features. We are coming off an environment with massive global central banks flushing the market with cash. That's like driving down a well-paved road. But the next decade is not going to look like that. The next decade, as soon as they start to retreat, you're going to really, that's where active management and active portfolio construction is going to be so important, is understanding the fundamental risks that are out there. So, again, it isn't active or passive, but it is understanding the true risk that you are, that you're investing in as you make a decision on one versus the other as you're building that portfolio.
Thank you. I think it's relevant, no? Because it's like using the airbags, no? And I think it's only relevant when you need them, no? And so it's kind of interesting.
The reality is we don't know how soon they're going to be needed, but we do know that what has happened globally with the influx of money is not sustainable for the next decade. So at some point here, it's going to be very, very important.
I want to ask about ESG. What is Franklin Templeton overall stance on ESG factors when it comes to the companies you invest in? How does active investment management play a role in making these determinations?
Franklin Templeton is a signer of the net zero, asset manager initiatives, as well as 3 of our Legg Mason investment teams. And that really came out of, 1, passion that we have around it, but 2, specifically on a climate side, but 2, because our clients are asking us for it. I just came from a global advisory committee meeting where you literally had sovereign wealth funds across the globe, Middle East, China, Europe, US, all of them were talking about climate and how they're thinking about investing because it's so important. It's such an important mandate to them. So I think that, and climate's just one component, right? There's a lot of other components in the ESG space, but it is clear that this is here to stay. At Franklin Templeton, 94% of our assets are screened for ESG, and we have $200 billion in assets that are specific impact-driven, with a mandate as far as achieving things like, green energy or gender equality. So those are the impact type driven. Here's the challenge: the data is not good out there. If you just take the top 5 ESG data providers, they only agree 57% of the time. Look, if you're going to invest in a large cap equity portfolio, chances are you can probably get pretty good ESG data, including even a carbon footprint. But the second you go out, you go emerging markets or you go small cap, that data doesn't really exist, and it requires active engagement to go get that data. And so at Franklin Templeton, the approach we have is we think it's a real advantage to have 19 independent investment teams. We have a centralized investment data lake where we store data that any of the teams want to go out and get scrubbed and normalized so it can be used. And a subset of that is ESG data. So for example, our global macro team gets 14 different data feeds to build their ESG framework. Once that's in the investment data lake, it's available for any of our teams to use. And this is particularly important because, again, the data that you can acquire isn't that good yet. And then what we've built is a ESG Sustainability Council where there's a representative from each of our 19 different investment teams that they can share best practices. Now, how one team applies their ESG factors and screens will vary versus another team. And we like that independence because it's very important that it's part of their investment process. So they independently will use that data in whatever their approach to it is. But we think having the most robust data set is going to be a real competitive advantage over time. And I think that today it really requires active engagement. You just can't do a passive approach and get true ESG factor analysis.
Thank you, Jenny. We have been leaders. Thank to you on ESG, and I know we have been very active. And on that regard, I want to ask you about the diversity and inclusion. It has been a key focus for the firm and for you personally. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I'm the inclusion champion, no? Here. But I mean, how you are approaching the diversity and inclusion today as an organization, no? Because it's not just a will. And how can the industry push this issue forward?
No, so listen, our approach to diversity and inclusion comes from a belief that it is good business. Having a diverse workforce, it has been proven that when you get a diverse perspectives in the room trying to solve a problem, the more diverse the group is, the better solutions you will come up with. So if we get a workforce that all looks the same, I think you're not going to be competitive because you're not going to be creative enough, particularly in this time of great technological advances. So, you know, it's part of the growth story, not to mention that our clients are diverse. And people want to be able to invest with people that they can feel akin to. And so it's important to have a diverse firm to represent your diverse client base. We hired a chief diversity and inclusion officer, Regina Curry, and she's a direct report of mine. We came out with our corporate social responsibility scorecard where we list our metrics around D&I. And we do that because we want to be accountable. And, you know, we think that it starts with the pipeline of people. I mean, the facts remain that as an industry, we're not particularly diverse, but we're improving. And the way we're going to improve is we've got to attract people at an early age. So just take women. You know, they say that girls make or women make a decision around their career around 18 to 25 years old, 5% or something like 5 years earlier than men or something. They decide what career they want to be in. So that's a really important time to hook them and get them to want to be in our industry. We're doing programs with colleges to do internships for traditionally underrepresented people. We do both programs for women. We have a program with historically Black colleges and universities in the US because we want to get folks in and believe that they become interns, they will then see themselves in this industry. So it's about increasing the pipeline of people. And then it's about the practices, the corporate practices you have. Do you retain those people? And I actually say that one of the things to retain women is, you know, are you encouraging men in your organization to go and take their children to the doctor, right? You know, it's one thing for, you know, to say that you want to give the flexibility for women to do it. But actually, I know there are a lot of men who like to really be engaged with their kids, and there's a stigma around whether they're going to be engaged. They leave the office to go coach their kids' team. So you have to create an environment where these practices are acceptable across the organization for both genders. to be able to keep retention. So it's about the practices within the firm, and it's about measuring them, because you have to be accountable for it. And then it's, as I said, being the public commitment, going out and publicly saying, here's the numbers, we're going to continue to improve, here's what we're doing to be able to do that. I'd say I'm optimistic. I just saw a statistic where the number of women who are taking CFAs has increased from something like 32% to 41% in the last 5 years. That's a big jump. And so, the fact that the CFA is getting more women interested in taking it, I think is, makes me very optimistic that we will get more women into this business. And then my final thing is, I think it's the purpose, right? It's communicating to people what we do in such a way that it resonates. And I tell the story about, asking my daughters, would any of them follow me into this business? And my one daughter responded and said, Mom, I want to do something that helps people. And I said, are you kidding me? This is a business that helps people. We help people achieve the most important milestones in their lives. Like, our employees come in every day carrying that responsibility on their shoulders and trying to focus on what's right for clients. And if we can talk about our industry more in the way that we should be talking about it, because that's what we do, I think we're going to attract a more diverse employee base.
Agree, but it's also about and I know this because I have been working for you quite a long time now. But it's about the whole ecosystem, no? To foster and to create the culture of inclusion, no? And also to be very successful as a human being, no? And because people know that you're a very successful woman, and that you are managing one of the largest companies in the world, but you also have 5 kids, no? and you go to the schools and you do mom stuff, no? But it's a true culture in the company, and we all thank you for that. Taking a step back, there's room for improvement in the way asset managers explain the benefits of what they do to the wider world, no? And you just briefly touch on this, but how do you view the investment management industry role in deploying capital as a force for good in the world, no? Just like the conversation you just had with your daughter, no?
I actually think that it's a really exciting time to be in the asset management business, because there's probably few industries that can create a more equitable society by deploying capital to historically underrepresented groups and entrepreneurs that will allow them to grow socioeconomically, right? A more fair way to participate in the economic, markets. And so how can you do that? Like, we know that there's a bias that exists in how capital is deployed. So just taking the US, less than 2% of venture capital money goes to female entrepreneurs. So 50% of the population gets less than 2%. Do you think they don't have those ideas? Now, if you talk to them, they'll say 57% of them will say the venture capitalists didn't understand my business plan. They didn't get my business model. And they're pitching it to an environment which is only 12% women. So chances are they're pitching their ideas to a bunch of men. Now, do we really think men don't get the ideas? Well, here's an example. In 1946, there was a woman who had been kind of an entrepreneur, and her father was an entrepreneur, and she became a mother. And after having her second child, she got frustrated by how her diapers leaked. And they had these rubber panties at the time. But the problem with the rubber panties is your baby got diaper rash. So she came up with an idea. She took her shower curtain and she took some diapers and she layered in and she created the first, what really became the disposable diaper concept, where it pulled the wetness away. And it was a really great invention. She patented it, and then she went out and pitched it to the venture capitalists. And they all said to her, you know what, we've never actually heard women complain about this. We don't think there's a market for this. They're not talking about this problem. Now, the question in 1947, how many men that she was pitching to do you think had ever changed a diaper? Right? So if the problem doesn't resonate with you, it's hard for you to get excited about the market opportunity. So this is where there's a real opportunity to, one, we've got to get more women making the investment decisions, more minorities making the investment decisions, right? So the problems that they're solving are going to resonate with the venture capitalists. But two, we actually can have some really exciting new companies if we can change our investment screen from the way we've historically done it to be more broad. And I'm going to give one more example. A friend of mine who, a black man who wanted to set up a restaurant, and I personally invested because he's a friend of mine, and I'm always impressed because he's amazing at all the things he does. And he's done really, really well. He's now expanding to his number 2 restaurant. And I thought about it and I thought, wow, if he tried to come to me as an investor, right? I was kind of doing it because he was my friend. You would say, wait a second, you've never run a restaurant. Oh, and you're setting it up in your childhood neighborhood, which is kind of a poor neighborhood. Really, what you should do is bring in a partner who's run a restaurant and probably pick a different neighborhood because, you know, that's where the money is. You know what? He knew his neighborhood. He knew the opportunity. And he's been incredibly successful. So that's where we have an opportunity, but we have to change the investment screen as we're thinking about deploying these. And frankly, if we don't, and people feel that the capital markets are unfair, that's where in democratic society, you're going to have a real problem. So I'm just excited to think about, you know, our opportunities in this. And what Franklin Templeton has done is we started out, we invested as a lead institutional investor in a fund called Shatter Fund, which was focused on women entrepreneurs. And we're now launching our own Stratos Fund, which is run by female entrepreneurs or female venture capitalists at Franklin and targeting female entrepreneurs. We're also have invested in something called Black Capital. And our intention is to also be able to run our own fund that's focused on Black entrepreneurs and just look at different segments. And we think this opportunity exists in all markets. And we actually think that because we're contrarians, right? So we think that because they've been overlooked, that there's actually a great investment return opportunity. So we can both achieve doing good as well as getting good returns.
In Mexico, this is relevant also. I mean, we're not as advanced, but I mean, a lot of the investments that the funds are making become highways, become hospitals, become education programs and things like that. So I think that we need to be more vocal to talk about the benefits of the investment industry and how we are deploying capital. No? And finally, and I think that this is the most relevant question for the forum, no, is about the industry, no, and what advice would you give to the industry in Mexico?
You know, I would say, first of all, the beauty of it is, as you're a burgeoning, and you've been around a long time, but as a growing asset management industry, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So you can kind of look across the globe and see where it works and where it's not working and what works well or not. And one thing that consistently works is open architecture, right? It is impossible for one firm to be the best at everything. And so creating an environment where there's more open architecture, I think is really, really important. So that's kind of first and foremost. I think what we're seeing is a trend towards technology enabling those who traditionally haven't been able to have access to the market to be able to get the market. I think you'll see more platforms that are going to enable more and more people to invest. And I think that's a really good thing, right? We need to have people feel that they can be part of the opportunities as an economy grows, because if you feel you've been left out, you resent that. So I think technology is going to enable that, which is important. And I think that, you know, we're going to see more, there's going to be more evolution of the types of investment products. They're going to be more customized because of technology. And that's going to be where it's important for the regulatory environment to both balance growth with also not allowing people to hurt themselves by, you know, throwing all their money in an incredibly risky investment, not really understanding the risks in it. I'm a big believer in advice and having professional advice given to people, because I think that, you know, oftentimes in momentum markets like we've seen, everybody's a brilliant investor. And then what happens is the market tanks and it scares them from ever investing in the markets again, and then they lose that opportunity. So I think that's where the regulatory environment, you know, really focuses on trying to do what's right from an investor protection standpoint, and the industry has to engage in that while also not inhibiting the growth of the industry. Because what you often see is if people don't have access to the traditional markets, they go find other ways to do it. I mean, frankly, you look at what's going on in the US in the digital currency space, and it's just massive, but it's kind of outside the regulated environment, and people don't really understand what their risk is in that space. So I think that's an important component, is the industry and the regulators engaging together to be productive on trying to grow this the business.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I mean, I think there is especially in Mexico, I think there is a lot of room to grow. It's a young industry, but we are growing. It's amazing the growth we have in the last 18 months due to the pandemic, but we grew in almost more than 30% on new investors. And we are only 32 asset managers. If you compare it to Brazil with 700 plus managers, I mean, there is a lot of room to grow. Truly, from my heart, I want to thank you for your time, for being so kind and so joyful, and thank you for taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you, and again, thank you for the invitation. It's been an honor to be able to address this group. So thank you very much.